balance right. And, you know, we are very lucky, actually, in our countries, because we are in a situation where people of different faiths are free to practice their faith as they like. And that is, in my view, an absolutely fundamental part of democracy. And it's something that people of religious faith have to be very clear about and stand up and do. And one of the reasons why, you know, for me, I think it's actually important for people of religious faith to have people like Christopher challenge us and say, okay, this is how we see religion. Now you get out there and tell us how it's different, and where it isn't different, how you're going to make it so. And I think that's a positive and good thing. All I ask for is that where people of faith are speaking in the public sphere, then people accept that we have a right to do that, and that sometimes we do that actually because we believe in the things that we're saying, and we're not trying to subvert or change democracy. On the contrary, we simply want to be part of it, and our voice is a voice that has a right to be heard alongside the voice of others.
Well, I see Christopher writing furiously, so I'm going to ask him to come back on that point.
Well, I hadn't anything especially to add there. I think I'd rather give another person a chance for a question.
Okay. Well, it's a question that was debated for you, Christopher, on monkdebates.com in the lead-up to this evening. On our discussion board, many people saying that religion provides a sense of community in modern societies where immersed in a consumer culture, more often than not living alongside fellow citizens who are more maybe self-directed than other-directed. What do you say about the pure community function of religion? Isn't that a public good, a valid public good of religious belief?
Absolutely. I say good luck to it. And the way I phrase it in my book, it's available at fine bookstores everywhere, is that I propose a pact with the faithful. Say, I'll take it again. I'll quote from the great Thomas Jefferson. I don't mind if my neighbor believes in 15 gods or in none. He neither by that breaks my leg or picks my pocket. I would echo that and say that as long as you don't want your religion taught to my children in school, given a government subsidy, imposed on me by violence, any of these things, you are fine by me. I would prefer not even to know what it is that you do in that church of yours. In fact, if you force it on my attention, I will consider it a breach of that pact. Have your own bloody Christmas and so on. Do your slaughtering, if possible, in an abattoir, and don't mutilate the genitals of your children. Because then I'm afraid it gets within the ambit of law. All right, so don't you think that's reasonably pluralistic and communitarian of me? I think it is. Why is it a vain hope on my part? Why is that? Has this pact ever been honoured by the other side? Of course not. And it's a mystery to me, and I'll share it with you. If I believed that there was a saviour who'd been appointed or sent by, or a prophet, appointed or sent by a God who bore me in mind and loved me and wanted the best for me, if I believed that, and that I possessed the means of grace and the hope of glory, to phrase it like that, I think I might be happy. They say it's the way to happiness. Why doesn't it make them happy? Well, don't you think it's a perfectly decent question? Why doesn't it? Because they won't be happy till you believe it too. And why is that? Because that's what their holy books tell them. Now, I'm sorry, it's enough with saying in the name of religion. Do these texts say that until every knee bows at the name of Jesus and so on, there will be no happiness? Of course it is what they say. It isn't just a private belief. It is rather, and I think always has been, and it's why I'm here, actually a threat to the idea of a peaceable community. And very often, as now, and frequently, a very palpable one. So I think that's the underlying energy that powers the friendly disagreement between Tony and myself.
Tony, would you like to come back on that topic of religion and community, or move on to another question? Let's move on. Also on our website, big discussion around the topic of religion and its role in the invasion of Iraq. And Mr. Blair, the question is for you, and it's about something that many people posted about, something you said once about the interplay of religion and politics. And to quote you directly, you said, "What faith can do is not tell you what is right, but give you the strength to do it." The question being, what role did faith play in your most important decision as Prime Minister, the invasion of Iraq?
I think we can nail this one pretty easily. It was not about religious faith. And, you know, one of the things that I sometimes say to people is look, the thing about religion and religious faith is if you are a person of faith, it's part of your character. It defines you in many ways as a human being. It doesn't do the policy answers, I'm afraid. Okay? So as I used to say to people, you know, you don't go into church and look heavenward and say to God, right, next year the minimum wage, is it £6.50 or £7? Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you the answer. And even on the major decisions that are to do with war and peace that I've taken, they were decisions based on policy. And so they should be, and you may disagree with those decisions, but they were taken because I genuinely believe them to be right.
So, Christopher, the natural follow-on question to you is, how did you square the circle, or maybe you didn't, between your support for the Iraq War and, let's say, the current then-President, George W. Bush, and his very public evocation of faith in terms of his rhetoric around the invasion?
Well, I don't remember. In fact, I don't think you can point out to me any moment where George Bush said he was under divine order or had any divine warrant for intervention in Iraq. In fact, I'm perfectly certain that he might not have minded at some points giving that impression, but he wanted to give that impression about everything that he did. George Bush is someone who, as with his immediate predecessor, after various experiments in faith, ended up in his wife's church, most comfortable place for him to be. She's after all is the one who said to him, "If you take another drink, you scumbag, I'm leaving and taking the kids." Which is his way of saying he found Jesus and gave up the bottle. We know this. We know this to be true. Now, like a good Methodist, I was at a Methodist school for many years myself. Like a good Methodist, George Bush says the following: "I've done all I can with this argument and with this conflict. From now on, all is in God's hands." That's quite different, I think. Would have made him a perfectly good Muslim, as a matter of fact. Combination of fatalism with a slightly sinister feeling of being chosen. Anyway. No, what's striking most to the eye of those who observe the debate on what Tony Blair and I agree to call the liberation of Iraq is the unanimous opposition of the leadership of every single Christian church to it, including the President's own and now the Prime Minister's own. The Methodist Church in the United States adamantly opposed, the Vatican adamantly opposed, as it had been to the liberation of Kuwait in 1991. Not the first time in the world that a sort of sickly Christian passivity has been preached in the face of fascist dictatorship. And, of course, I was very surprised by the number of liberal Jews who took the same about a regime that harbored genocidal thoughts towards them. And, if it comes to that, but I'm not the arbiter of what's rational in the mind of the religious thinker, given the number of Muslims put to the sword by Saddam Hussein's regime, quite extraordinary to see the extent to which Muslim fundamentalists flock to his defense. But I don't expect integrity or consistency from those quarters. But those of us who worked with people, with Iraqi intellectuals like Kanan Makia, with the Kurdish leadership, the secular left opposition of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, the Iraqi Communist Party, I have to give it credit for this, many feminists and other secular who'd worked for years to bring down Saddam Hussein, are very proud of our solidarity with those comrades, those brothers and sisters. We're still in touch with them. We have nothing to apologize for. It's those who would have kept a cannibal and a Caligula and a professional sadist in power who have the explaining to do. Thank you.
Well, I want to be conscious of our time and go to our two final on-stage questions, and I believe the first one is for Mr. Blair, a student at the Munk School of Global Affairs. Introduce yourself and ask your question to Mr. Blair.
Yes, good evening. My name is Jonah Cantor, and my question pertains to something that's come up earlier this evening. Religion on both sides is often seen as an obstacle to peace in the Middle East, and I was wondering what role you believe faith can play in a positive manner in helping to bring peace between Israelis and Palestinians.
Well, I remember a few months back I was in Jericho, and when you go out from Jericho, they took me up to. We went to visit the Mount of Temptation, which is where I think they take all the politicians. And the guide that was showing us around, the Palestinian guide, he suddenly stopped at one point and he said, "This part of the world," he said, "Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, why did they all have to come here?" And I sort of said, "Well, supposing they hadn't, would everything be fine?" And he said, "Oh, probably not." But you know, the religious leadership can play a part in this. For example, I don't think you will get a resolution of the issue of Jerusalem unless, which is a sacred and holy city to all three Abrahamic faiths, unless people of faith are prepared to try and find common ground so that they are entitled to worship in the way that they wish. And it's correct that in both Israel and Palestine, you see examples of religious fundamentalism and people espousing and doing extreme things as a result of their religion. But I can also tell you that there are rabbis and people of the Muslim faith on the Palestinian side who are desperately trying to find common ground and ways of working together. And I think, you know, part of the issue, and the reason indeed for me starting my faith foundation, is that we can argue forever the degree to which what is happening in the Middle East is a result of religion or the result of politics. But one thing is absolutely clear, that without those religious faith playing a positive and constructive role, it's going to be very difficult to reach peace. So my view, again, and I think this is in a sense one of the debates that underlies everything we've been saying this evening, is if it is correct that you're not going to simply eliminate religion, you know, you're not going to drive religion out of the world, then let's work on how we make those people of different faiths, even though they believe that their own faith is the path that they believe to salvation, how they can work across the faith divide in order to produce respect and understanding and tolerance. Because, believe it or not, amongst all the examples of prejudice and bigotry that Christopher quite rightly draws attention to, there are also examples of people of deep religious faith, Jewish, Muslim and Christian, who are desperately trying to search for peace, and with the right political will supporting that, who would play a major part in achieving peace. So I agree.